The alarm on Station Keshvantar screamed through every corridor at once, and I dropped my tray of ration bars and ran before I even understood why. Red light pulsed against the walls. A voice on the speakers said the outer docking clamp had failed, and that an alien vessel was drifting loose from the station, its hull grinding against the airlock frame hard enough to spark. I am Daniel Hargrove, translator liaison for the trade delegation between Earth and the Ashen Concord, and in that moment, my only thought was that the ship losing its grip on our station carried 43 lives that were not mine, and one of them mattered to me more than my training ever prepared me for. I sprinted down the long spine of the station, past crew members bracing themselves against handrails, past sealed blast doors that hissed open just long enough to let me through. My chest burned. My mind kept circling back to her, Velath, third officer of the Concord ship, the one being on that vessel who had spent 3 weeks trying to hold together a fragile peace between two species that barely trusted each other. When I reached the control deck, sparks were falling from a ruptured conduit above the main console. Engineers shouted over each other, trying to reroute power before the clamp tore free completely. Through the reinforced viewport, I could see the Concord ship tilting, slow and heavy, its hull lights flickering as internal systems fought to compensate. A woman named Grace Ellery, our chief systems officer, grabbed my arm. "Daniel," she said, "we need someone who can talk to their bridge. Their translator is down. If we cannot coordinate the thruster burn together, both ships get damaged, maybe worse." I did not wait for permission. I dropped into the comms chair and opened a channel, my hands shaking as I keyed in the frequency I had memorized weeks ago, back when this whole assignment still felt like paperwork and diplomacy, rather than a matter of survival. "Velath," I said into the static. "This is Daniel. Can you hear me?" For 3 long seconds there was nothing but the hiss of dying signal. Then her voice broke through, tight and controlled despite the chaos I could hear behind her. "Daniel, our stabilizers are failing. If we correct too hard, we tear the clamp housing apart and vent the lower deck. If we do nothing, we drift into your station's support strut." I looked at Grace. She was already running numbers on a secondary display, her fingers flying. "Tell her to give us her thrust output," Grace said. "We match it from our side. We can hold the frame steady if her burn is precise enough." I relayed it. My Concord vocabulary stretched thin under pressure, but Velath understood immediately. She always understood immediately. That was one of the first things I loved about working with her, back before I let myself use a word like love, even quietly in my own head. "Sending output now," she said. "Daniel, if this fails, tell your people it was not their mistake." "Nothing is failing," I said, more forcefully than I meant to. "Just hold your burn steady. I trust you." The next 90 seconds felt longer than any negotiation I had sat through in my life. Grace called out numbers. Our station engines answered in careful, measured pulses, and on the screen, the Concord ship's tilt began to slow, then stop, then reverse, millimeter by millimeter, until the grinding shriek of metal faded into a low mechanical groan, and finally silence. The clamp held, the ship settled back into its berth. Around me, the control deck erupted into relieved shouting, but I was already moving, already running back down the corridor toward the airlock, where the Concord crew would disembark once pressure equalized. I found her in the observation bay an hour later, once the reports were filed, and the engineers had stopped celebrating long enough to let people breathe. She was standing near the reinforced window, watching the stars the way she always did, when she needed to remember that the universe was larger than whatever crisis had just tried to swallow her whole. Her carapace still bore faint scorch marks along one shoulder plate. Her eyes, usually a shifting amber or gold depending on her mood, were dimmed almost to gray, the color the Concord crew wore when they were exhausted past the point of hiding it. "You came to check on me," she said without turning around. "Of course I did," I said. "You held that ship together with sheer nerve." I watched the readouts. Half a second of hesitation, and we would have lost the whole lower deck. "I know," she said quietly. "That is why I cannot stop shaking." I stepped closer, close enough to see the tremor in her clawed hands, the kind of shake that only comes after the danger has passed, and the body finally lets itself feel the fear it postponed. "I heard 2 of your crew earlier," she said suddenly, before I could speak again, before the alarm. They were looking at pictures from home. Talking about human women, smooth skin, soft features, symmetry. I was walking past and I heard it, and I thought about how I look nothing like that, and how absurd it is that I am standing here, trying to build peace between our people, when I cannot even convince myself that I belong in the same room as something beautiful. She turned to face me then, and her voice dropped to barely more than breath. "I am not beautiful like human women," she whispered. I did not answer right away. I let the words sit there, because I wanted her to know I was not brushing past them, not rushing to comfort her, just to end an awkward silence. I thought about the last 3 weeks, the negotiations, the small moments nobody else had noticed. "Velath," I said, "do you remember the first day I arrived on your ship, back before the treaty talks even began?" She tilted her head, uncertain where I was going. "You were arguing with your captain about trade routes," I said, "and you were so frustrated that the plates along your jaw flared out, copper and violet in the light, like something out of a dream I did not know I was allowed to have. I remember standing there thinking that no human face had ever done that to me, not once, not ever." Her eyes flickered, the gray edging toward something warmer. "Today," I continued, "you held a damaged ship steady through sheer will, using instincts and senses my body does not even have. You compensated for stabilizer failure using patterns of movement based on how your ancestors flew through storms on your homeworld, a place I have never seen and probably never will, and you did it without panic, because panic was a luxury you refused yourself. That is only function," she said, though her voice had softened. "Not beauty. Grace ran to comms tonight and rerouted power in 90 seconds flat," I said. "Nobody called her beautiful for it. But when I look at you, I do not separate what you can do from who you are. Your competence is part of you. Your fear, which you are only now letting yourself feel, is part of you too. And so is the way your carapace catches light that human skin never could." She looked down at her own hands again, the way she often did when she was uncertain, turning them over as if checking for damage that was not physical. "On my homeworld," she said, "beauty is measured by symmetry and molt cycles. I molted unevenly as a larva. My own mother told me, gently, that I would need to compensate in other ways." "Then your own mother was wrong," I said, "and so was whatever standard she was measuring you against. Beauty is not one fixed shape copied over every species in this galaxy. It cannot be, or none of us would recognize each other as anything worth looking at." A small sound left her, surprised and almost embarrassed, and her mandibles parted slightly at the edges, plates lifting in that expression I had only seen a handful of times before. Her eyes brightened from gray toward gold, slow and unmistakable, like dawn breaking over unfamiliar ground. "That is a strange expression on your face," she said, echoing words I somehow already knew she would use. "I am pleased with myself," I admitted. "Why?" "Because after everything that happened tonight, after nearly losing your ship and half this station, I finally got to see you smile. And I have been trying to get you to do that for 3 weeks." She laughed, then, quiet at first, then fuller, a sound utterly unlike anything a human throat could produce, rising and warm, and it filled that observation bay in a way the emergency alarms never had. "Thank you," she said. "Human. I have a name," I reminded her. "I know," she said, gold eyes bright now, almost playful despite the exhaustion still clinging to her shoulders. "I am choosing not to use it yet. It feels safer that way." Outside the viewport, the stars kept turning, indifferent to crises resolved, and fears finally spoken aloud. The station hummed back into its normal rhythm around us, repair crews sealing the last of the damaged conduits, engineers filing reports that would be forgotten within a week. But in that quiet room, something had shifted that would not be forgotten. A woman who had spent her whole life measuring herself against a standard never built for her had finally let herself be seen, fully, without apology, by someone who found her extraordinary, exactly as she was. I stayed with her until her hands stopped shaking, and her eyes settled into a steady, warm gold that no emergency light could explain. Neither of us said much after that. We did not need to. Some peace treaties are signed with careful words across a conference table. Ours was signed quietly, in an observation bay, between two people from different worlds who had just learned that trust could hold a damaged ship together, and that honesty, offered gently, could do something even more difficult. It could make someone believe, for the first time, that they were beautiful, exactly as they were,